My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Sofia Torres-McKay and Ryan McKay at Cramoisi's new tasting room in Dundee. It's June 4th, 2021. Thank you both so much for joining us today. First question, biggest question, why wine?
Wine. Thank you, Rich, for coming here, and thank you, Tia. White wine, I think for me, white wine, it would be just because it has like a whole story in a bottle, in a glass, right? It's like the representation of love, representation of passion, hard work, community, celebration. So I think involves lots of happiness too, but also maybe not. You just it's just like I just like it just because it tells you a story of different hands involved in able to make that wine, and that requires lots of work, but also a passion. Mm-hmm. So to me, I was very involved with that, with wine, just because of that. I didn't know too much about all the hard work that requires to make wine and to grow grapes. So I'm very respectful of the people that do that. Now I really understand the whole process, and I'm even more passionate about it. Yeah.
How did you get looped into this, Ryan?
Yeah. So I guess my interest in wine would date back to working at Oasis Fine Foods in the wine department there. They sent me to a wine study course, Bob Sogi's World of Wine or something like that, down in Eugene. And that was kind of what piqued my interest was that experience, and just one of the things I think that caught my attention early on was just that every wine is different, and it really kind of harkens back to the place that it was grown. And there's all these vineyards across the world, and or right next door to each other, and they all make a different and unique wine. Kind of like people, I guess, in that way. And yeah, I guess to some of the stuff that Sophia was talking about, my appreciation of wine has grown and changed over the years, right? Especially through the process of planting our own vineyard and starting our own winery. You definitely deepened that for sure. You're getting more involved in the process of the making of it. Mm-hmm.
So, Sophia, we'll start with you. Talk a bit about your life before wine. Where did you grow up, and mm-hmm. how did you first discover wine?
Yeah. So I grew up in Mexico City. I was born there. I moved to the United States in 2002. My experience with wine, I will say I used to drink it, but I used to drink the cheap wine. I didn't know too much about wine, so actually I don't have the knowledge of that I have right now. But to me, it was more like drinking it just because I like it. But I didn't know how to describe it. I didn't know, sometimes like where the wine was coming from, that kind of stuff. I mean, I used to have my favorites, but I think my introduction with wine, like the deep introduction with wine, it was when I was maybe 24, when I started a little bit more picky about wines. I started traveling more, so I started enjoying a little bit more the whites. I was more like whites, very refreshing wines. But also I was a very cocktail girl. I mean, I grew up in Mexico City, so I used to drink lots of tequila, a little bit of mezcal, lots of cocktails with vodka, that kind of stuff. So not so much into wine. So then I moved to the United States in 2002. I went to the university in Mexico, so I studied my bachelor's in science communication and marketing. And then I started working with a company that it was a software company in Mexico. And then that company gave me the opportunity to work in the United States. We were partners of Informatica, this company that is in Redwood City, California, and able to help them to expand markets through distribution in Latin America. So I was helping them to do that, and to me that was a great opportunity. And so I didn't have any experience about making wines or growing grapes. I was just in the corporate business, trying to take that opportunity to grow my career into that path. and then living in the United States and working with this company, I met Ryan. So Ryan was actually working 2 cubicles from me, and we didn't date right away, but we met exactly the first day when I moved, remember? And we started talking a lot. He was always super nice with me, and then when he heard that I was staying longer than supposed, the project was supposed for 1 year, but then they asked me if I could stay longer, so I said yes. And Ryan started inviting me to go out, so we started dating, and then I realized he was from Eugene, Oregon. So when we started coming to Eugene to visit his parents, I get to know the Pinot Noirs. I didn't know so much about the Pinot Noirs, and to be honest, I was very ignorant about the Willamette Valley. I didn't know the Pinot Noirs for the Willamette Valley, the Chardonnays. I didn't know anything. I didn't know even that existed. I knew more about Napa Valley and other regions in the world, Sonoma, of course, because I was living around that area. But that was the way that I started knowing about the Pinot Noirs, the great Pinot Noirs that Oregon produces, because Ryan is from Eugene. So. I fell in love with both. I fell in love with Ryan, I fell in love with the Pinots, I fell in love with the whole story, with how beautiful the people are here, like helping each other. And then we started dating, we married after a year, 8 months. Then we have kids, and we both have that passion, especially Ryan. He told you about his passion when he was working at Oasis, right? So he used to talk about wine, and we always, every night, we used to have a bottle of wine. It's part of our food. We would say it's not just to drink to get drunk. It's really to drink to enjoy it and to appreciate that, right? So Ryan, he cooked really well, so we always share a bottle of wine. So I think that was my first real, kind of getting to know the wines better from this region, right? And we start traveling a lot together to different regions in the world, and we just very, people that we just always enjoy wine. So that's kind of like how I got into wine, just like real, like I was very interested about the process. But even then, by then, before we have this, I didn't know the whole process that requires to grow grapes. So then I can just tell you about that after Ryan talks about it.
So grew up in Eugene and working in wine. So tell me about, even though that wasn't the path you started on, tell me about kind of the passion for wine and learning about wine and why you eventually thought it might be something you'd like to do with your career.
Yeah, I was actually interested in a career in wine right from kind of leaving college, but I didn't find I guess the opportunity I was looking for or something. So I ended up working in technology down in the Bay Area. Fortunately, that's how I met Sofia. We used to travel just kind of the local wine country there. One of our favorite things to do was to travel up to the Russian River Valley, because it's a bit more like Oregon wine country, and it's a little greener, a little lusher, cooler. They grow cooler varietals there. And it's not quite as busy and crowded as some of the other stops near the Bay Area. And those were great weekends. We used to spend out there and out at the coast and stuff. And one of the things that I reflect back upon that though was so even back then, some of the places that you most wanted to visit were hard to access, right? And you could go to a place and you just wanted to buy a bottle of their Pinot Noir and you couldn't. And that really kind of stuck with me as something I would like to try and avoid here, which is interesting because our wine club is nearly at capacity. We're kind of thinking about how we want to deal with that, but we, want to continue to make it so that anybody could come up here and taste our wine and take a bottle home if they want to, and try and keep it an accessible experience, right? Versus something that's closed down and inaccessible to most people. So.
So I'm curious about, obviously, and both of you enjoyed wine as consumers, and both of you enjoyed exploring wine regions and wines. I'm curious about sort of developing a palate for wine, a language for wine. At what point did you feel sort of like you kind of understood at least how to describe wines, and what kind of wines you appreciated and liked, and maybe would like to make someday?
Well, for me, it goes back to that first job in college. That was very much kind of part of what I had to learn to do for that job, was to be able to identify what we were looking for, and probably more importantly, be able to just kind of convey to a customer what they could expect, or maybe kind of steer them in the direction of what they would like. But I always had an interest in cooking. Kind of going back to when I was a little kid, just working with my mom in the kitchen, and so
he's very good.
Yeah, food and wine are a match made to be, right? So to me, there's some of it's somewhat natural, right? It's just if you love the flavors of food and kind of trying to pair those with a wine and whatnot, it's all kind of the same, really.
I'm curious why Pinot Noir against, you're trying all these different kinds of wines, all these different kind of varietals.
Yes.
What about Pinot Noir was intriguing to you?
First because, Ryan kind of contagious me with that passion about the grapes that they grow in Oregon, right? The Pinot Noir. Being in Mexico, I had the influence of the big, bold, big reds, So to me, my palate was more friendly with those kind of wines. But I remember I used to drink them by itself. So when I came here, or I started dating Ryan, and he started introducing me with Pinot Noirs from Oregon, I was like, oh wow, this is so smooth. You don't need to have food, because my palate was, trained with the other wines. And it's not that I was a big connoisseur. I'm still learning. I don't define myself that I'm like an expert, because I'm not. I'm still learning. You were talking about at the point, like you feel now like you can describe the wines and that kind of, I still have to learn a lot. I'm not a sommelier. I'm a grower. I have this business, but every day I think we just keep learning. I love learning. I love tasting different wines. I need to keep training my palate to appreciate the different varietals, not just Pinot, right? So I guess to me it was very interesting when I start getting more into wines to see the differences between the grapes and the personality of the wine and the profiles of the different wines, but also, as Ryan mentioned, the personality of where the wine comes from. So I was getting a little bit more interested about the regions, how the regions affect, the climate, the microclimate, the ways that you farm your grapes. It could be biodynamic, it could be organic, it could be conventional, and it really, really influences the flavor of your wine. It doesn't matter what varietal, but it matters what you do in your vineyard. And I think that's what intrigues me more, because if you screwed up in your vineyard, if you screwed up, if you don't have good ethics in your vineyard, if you don't have love for your place, if you don't have that passion for what you're growing, if you don't have a good relationship with the people that really tends your grapes, with your winemaker, with the people in the community, all that kind of like, that's the part that really, I think is deposit my passion for this, So, but I'm not an expert. I'm still learning from experts. I learned a lot from Ryan. It's pretty good about describing wines, I guess. But I'm learning. I don't consider myself expert. I'm just still, there's lots of room to learn. Yeah.
So at what point does this start to become a reality? At what point do you decide that you're going to find a space and start a wine brand? What's the first step, and what was the impetus behind it?
Yeah. Well, me personally, I think had a desire to do something with wine later in life, and Sophia actually asked me when she was when we were dating. She's like, well, what would you want to do, after technology? And I said, I'd like to have an oyster farm or a vineyard. she's like, it's the funny part is she loves oysters. If you open a dozen fresh oysters, she would eat them all, and you might get one. So
No, it was very interesting.
but she was like, yeah, no, like don't. Oyster farm doesn't sound so interesting, but the vineyard sounds kind of cool. But
and now I think that's really interesting. And now I want to have the oyster farm as well.
So I think we had a little bit of an idea, kind of going back all the way then. But we were, work had taken us up to Canada, and we were living in Vancouver, BC, which was a place that we really loved and was very hard to leave. But at the same time, we were, had an eye for maybe the kind of the next chapter of our life, beyond corporate America. So, we started looking pretty intensely, would have been like in 2007, 2008, just really started kind of researching, but, trying to maybe model out what a business would look like. Interestingly, I kind of started with the notion that we would just grow grapes and we wouldn't make wine. And that's all changed, as time has gone on. But that was kind of what we were looking for. And then, I guess at some point we just realized that, maybe the timing was right. The markets, in BC were favorable for us to sell our home and to purchase something down here. We'd done a lot of the homework and kind of knew what we were looking for. And, we started looking and kind of found this place, through serendipity. We were, looking at places in the Eola Hills, on the east side of the Eola Hills, and had appointments that afternoon in Ribbon Ridge. There's, generally speaking, even 10 years ago, very little, if any, property in the Dundee Hills available. So and anybody that buys or gets a hold of a vineyard site here pretty much has knocked on somebody's door and made a deal that wasn't available to the general public, right? So, but we happened to be driving down this road right here, and there was a for sale sign. Like the old owner had just like this big piece of plywood that he'd stuck out on Warden Hill Road that said for sale 10 acres. And we said, oh, that's interesting. We wrote that down and ended up coming back to look at that at a later date. And that turned out to be the one. So,
yeah.
Tell me about the site when you found it. What was it like, and what did you kind of foresee for it?
Do you want to say, because
so when we got it, the history of this place, as I understand it, is originally it was an upland prairie or maybe the edge of an oak savanna, and had been turned into farms around the turn of the century. Originally it was prunes, walnuts, and cherries that were up here, and actually that little house over behind you that you can't see on the camera was a cherry drying house. And then in the Columbus Day storm, our neighbor over here, he inherited that property from his father. So he was out here as a young kid growing up in Portland, but they had the farm out here. He said that it blew down all the trees on this hill. So literally all the fruit trees were on the ground on that day back in the early 60s. And at that point, a lot of this was replanted to hazelnuts. And so this was a hazelnut farm. And then the people that we bought the property from had actually removed the hazelnuts with, the idea of planting a vineyard, but it never got to it. So,
right. Yeah.
So we got basically grass and weeds, which was good because it was easy to go from there to planting the vineyard. So
lots of wild mustard. Yeah. I remember when we came, it was completely yellow because all the mustard.
Yeah. Lots of mustard.
Yeah. But it was. I mean, it was ready for us to plant and. Before even we purchased the land, because we were very interested, Ryan always wanted to start from scratch. I was looking to live close to restaurants and because I didn't want to. I mean, Ryan used to travel a lot. I used to travel a lot. I wanted to be closer to highway or something. Not the highway, but I mean access to get to the airport, that kind of stuff, and restaurants, because I'm from a big city. So kind of like the country, it was a little bit, because I never lived in the countryside or wine country. So it was like, yeah, I want to live there, but I need some kind of urban, kind of a thing. But before we purchased the land, we hired a geologist. That he came and then he did some holes, in the property. He gave us a document with all the soils that this property has, and Ryan can tell you a little bit more deep about that. And by then I didn't understand anything about what he was saying, to be honest, because like how the soils, that's what I was telling you before, the soils really affect, or influence the wines, right? And I was just like listening, and I was like, okay, is this a place that we can plant grapes? I know it is, because we're surrounded of the pioneers, right? But I really wanted to hear that from him, right? But yeah, as Ryan said, we wanted to start from scratch. We wanted to select our own clones. We wanted to, even that we didn't know too much, or at least I didn't know that much about what clones were available, what clones we liked the best, We did lots of research, lots of tasting. But yeah, the property was completely clean for us to start, and I thought we was just so lucky to be, on Warning Hill Road, Dundee Hills, surrounded all these amazing pioneers that they help us a lot too, right? To understand this, and then Ryan, if you want to talk a little bit of the geology of the place, because it's very interesting. In these 10 acres that we purchased, that includes the house, so we have 7 acres of grapes right now, but the geology was very interesting. Now I understand more, but like before, when this guy came and Ryan was talking to him, I was like, I don't know what they're talking about, but I think it's good because Ryan is happy. So if you want to tell him about that process and the geology of the place.
Yeah, so we're here in the Red Hills of Dundee, Dundee Hills. Sofia was talking about that soil map that our soil geologist had put together for us. We didn't really realize what a great tool it would be at the time. We were just trying to make sure we were investing our life savings wisely, right? But what we came to realize was, when you think of the Red Hills, is you think of the Jori soil, and Jori soil by definition is, I think it's like 6 to 8 feet of relatively rock-free red soil, and it's born of basalt. And the soils that we have here are all of that Jori series. They are born of basalt, but they are highly variable in terms of their depth and their rock content. We have soil here that's much more similar to the Eola Hills in some areas, and then we have some areas that are very very much the traditional deep, Jori soils of Dundee Hills, and everything kind of in between. And so it was really interesting when we looked at that. It's like we got, so much variety in such a small piece of land. So then when we planted the vineyard, we took what we have about a little under 7 acres under vine and divided it up into 11 different vineyard blocks, which is a lot for a little vineyard. But the idea was that we were trying to isolate each one of those little areas of soil and then match an appropriate kind of clone and rootstock to it. And that just launched us into a whole, period of really, looking at the different Pinot Noir clones that were available that perhaps could become available to us, the impact of the rootstocks, and we really just dive deep on those subjects and tried to figure it out. And so, yeah, we've got those 11 different blocks. They're all unique clone rootstock soil combinations. So when we bring it all back together, there's a lot of complexity and diversity in the wine when we do that.
And it's a little bit tricky to farmer or to harvest, right?
Yeah.
Because those 11 blocks, some of them they ripe faster than other ones, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's just it's tricky, but adds the complexity that Ryan says, right?
Yeah.
To make better wines, yeah.
When you set out to, with all the research you're doing, obviously clonal research and soil research, did you have a flavor in mind? Did you have something? What were you trying to put in a bottle eventually? I guess I should back up. At first, you were talking about purely just planting grapes, and you were talking about making wine. When it came time to make wine, what kind of wine were you trying to make?
I guess we try to approach with a certain humbleness, a goal that lacks any humility, which is like we want to make the best wine in the world, right? So we try to approach that very humbly, right? So, but that was really the idea, and so from a Pinot Noir perspective, we wanted to create something that had great intensity and depth, but was also very very balanced and true to its varietal character, and really reflected the terroir of the place. And so I wouldn't say that we were shooting for any particular color or flavor or anything like that, but we wanted to make the best that we possibly could, and really kind of shoot for the stars on that one. So that was kind of the just the guiding principle to everything that we've done is just do it the absolute best that you could. So that came down to spacing, clonal selection, the amount of crop that we hang,
Cover crops.
Cover crops, and it actually led us to the biodynamic farming. So I think we have we've always kind of liked the idea of organic, but the biodynamics really kind of surfaced to us as a way to make the best wine, and that's kind of how we got interested in that. And then we kind of fell in love with the spiritual aspect of it, and just the closed loop farming and just some of the ideas behind it. But it wasn't that we started with that and then decided to plant a vineyard or whatever. It was kind of the means to the end of making the best wine. So.
And also, I just want to add, our purpose or intention was to really express our place, express the flavor of what our great Mother Nature gives you, right? As we work with the philosophy of biodynamics, I think we try to work with Mother Nature in some way, following the moon cycles. Don't ask me deep questions about that because I don't know. I just follow the calendar, right? I would like to get more deep into that, but just to understand, your land. That's very important because that's where your wine is going to grow, right? I mean, we're big believers about the wine is born in the vineyard. It doesn't born in a winery. So it's born in the vineyard. So we have to treat our place with respect. We have to treat our place like we treat our kids, right? With giving them the best nutrients that we can, and that's why we decided to go through biodynamics to create and to make our own preparations, right? We treat them with teas, for example, chamomile tea, horsetail tea, but as Ryan said, that wasn't, I didn't know anything about that when we purchased the land. I was just happy that we were here, but I didn't know that it came with the process. Ryan maybe had a better idea, but I was just learning with the process, and I'm very, very passionate about the whole philosophy about biodynamics. Some people, what I like about the biodynamics is about you just have to do it, and then if that works for your place, it's like you don't feed your kids the same. Some of your kids then don't eat the same foods. Some of them, they eat one thing and the other one eats one thing, and then they come different. The same with our place. We try to do the best for our place and follow that, the preparations, right? And I think that really makes the wines and influence the wines that we have, and they're beautiful. But Ryan was talking about there was no intention in the beginning about the flavor because we didn't know the land. So we didn't know how, the geology or how the wines will influence or express, and when you're drinking it, like plums and cranberries and that kind of stuff. I never thought about I want to make wine with cranberries. Maybe your soil cannot give you that. Maybe, your grapes don't do that. Your climate doesn't give you that. Our side is very kind of windy. So I always said that our grapes are a little bit thicker just because they develop a thicker skin in some areas, and maybe that's what maybe gives a little more intensity in the color. The time of the fermentation, the process of making wine. So there's like different characteristics. You just have to really walk in the vineyard as you make these preparations, you give these nutrients, and you really understand them, and then you just kind of learn the process about the potential of what the grape is gonna give you on the wine, right? So I think it's just a learning process. I mean, if somebody tells you that they know everything, it's missing something, right? I think you always have to learn, and that's why we have only one opportunity a year to make wines, right? To harvest the grapes, and every year is different, and we have to learn about that. And we have some, statistics about maybe years are similar to other years, and then that's the, kind of like the information that we have, the data that we have from other years. But every single year provides you an opportunity to understand your land in another, way, because the microclimate and the climate influence your grapes, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, I didn't know about. I wanted opulent wines, but smooth. That's what I wanted. But in terms of flavor, I didn't know too much. Yeah.
You mentioned biodynamics, obviously an interesting talk. I'm curious, as you were learning about biodynamics and as you were implementing it here, what were the biggest challenges for you in sort of being a biodynamic farm, and what were the benefits you saw, or when did you start seeing benefits from the biodynamic farming?
So we started practicing biodynamics, I think, pretty much right out of the gate in terms of wine production, right? Like I think maybe not our first year when we made 1 barrel of wine, but I think by 2015 we were doing it. And it's important to note we're not a certified biodynamic farm. I think we certainly could be, but we just haven't had the time to chase that. But that is probably in and of itself the greatest challenge, right? It's time intensive, and you have a lot of competing interests for your time. We've got 2 boys to raise. I still have a day job. Sofia's busy trying to run a business, pretty much by herself with a little bit of help from me. It's getting the time in to do all the different things is probably the greatest challenge, because it's in and on top of, it doesn't like replace anything, right? It's like a whole nother layer of things that you want to do on the farm that otherwise you wouldn't, right? In terms of the benefits that we see, we don't really have a baseline to compare it against, like the one or the other, but we've been extremely happy with the quality of the wine so far, and seems to be working well. So,
and also I will say one of the benefits that I think is very important, just because it's a philosophy that you practice, right? I think just to know that you are trying to do the best for your soils. The grapes appreciate that. Your vineyard stewards appreciate that, because they're not touching any chemicals. They're not touching any things that are going to affect, them. You're going to drink those wines, so you know that they're good for you to drink, and I think they're beautiful. And then the energy. So biodynamics is based on energy, right? Energy underground, energy above the cosmos, energy in the cosmos around you, right? So that energy really influence also your self energy, if you want to say, right? Like when you go outside and you look at your place, and then you look at the cover crops, how they're growing, and all the good preparation that you're doing. I mean, I spray chamomile tea to the vines when we have heat waves, right? And that benefits me too, right? Because the chamomile tea comes to my face, and it's just very relaxing. I try to calm down the vines about that. So all that, it really benefits the place. It really benefits you, and the energy. I mean, I hear some people that they say, "Oh my God, we love this place," and then we took them to the vineyard, and then they said, "It's just the energy feels good here. I don't know, for some reason, it's just like a different vibe. And when I hear that, I mean, I don't tell them about the energies, but some people, because I don't want people to think like this lady's crazy. When you start talking about those energies and that kind of thing, that could affect you. But people mention that, and I think that's also a great benefit, that you can see that your place it's alive, that your place has a good vibe, your place it's happy, right? You have your stress, in some way, that your place kind of it tells you how happy it is, right? I mean, if you walk on the roads and then you see, our grapes and the soils, and I mean, Ryan can tell you about his idea about bringing the native flowers and native grasses, I mean, just that, not everybody has that kind of stuff, and we just wanted to make it just because this is kind of our paradise, right? That we want to share with people, and you can tell about that, and I think that's a great benefit. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the native grasses that you were thinking?
Oh yeah, I guess tie back to we were talking about earlier, like what this was before. So it used to be an upland prairie. So we've started to try and move towards a no-till approach. Tilling disturbs the life underneath the soil, and so we're trying to move away from that, and at the same time restore the native plants in between the rows. So the idea being that the prairie could live between the grapes, and we'll see how it turns out. But we're just kind of getting started with that experiment, if you will. But I think we'll be expanding it this year for sure.
Yeah, but it's beautiful, because if you walk on the roads that we start that, you can see kind of like the grass, like the native grass, it looks kind of bluish, and you touch it, and it's just short, right? It's really short, but it's really soft. So I'm just imagining myself in a few years, all that is going to be like grass, and you can walk without shoes, because it's so soft. Like really, like I touch it, I'm like, this is going to be nice.
Yeah. Beats the invasive thistle, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a vineyard in the cloud. I like it.
Yeah.
So I jumped ahead a little bit earlier, and I need to back up and ask. So you mentioned that the original concept was a vineyard, just growing grapes, I assume selling grapes. At what point did you decide you wanted to make wine? And once you did, what was sort of the process behind getting started making wine?
Okay.
So by the time we chose to purchase this piece of property, we had kind of converted our thinking to the fact that we would be making wine in a winery, I'm not sure exactly when that transition happened, but it was somewhat the result of could we ever acquire enough land and develop a vineyard big enough to do it, and so we realized that our destiny was going to be a smaller farm, and this is how it would work. So now that's it was fine. It wasn't like we were being pushed in a direction we didn't want to go or anything. We were pretty excited about the prospect of making wine, and sought to find some excellent help in that area. So as we planted the vineyard, we started looking for a consulting winemaker to help us, and we talked to lots and lots of people, and ultimately met with Drew Voigt, and started to work with him, and it's been a great thing for us. We've been working with Drew for I think 7 years now. So
it's amazing. Yeah. But also, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but when we used to come here, when we were living in Canada, in BC, we used to come for Thanksgiving to visit his family, and then we always used to go wine tasting, and kind of like, I don't know if it was on purpose, but we were like, where is Drew? Or, I mean, at least we were a little bit, you were a little bit like, oh yeah, like the winemaker is Drew Voigt, we should go see him and talk to him. No, because we were thinking about, talking to him about making our wine, but I don't know, like we heard really good things about him, and then he brought high scores in the places that he used to work, And I remember very clearly when we went to Shea Vineyards. It was, I think, 2010, I think, or 2011. We purchased this land in 2011. Maybe 2010, 2009. He was working there, or maybe it was before. I don't remember the year. But they have a big event there, and there were just those vineyards. They just opened on Thanksgiving, right? So we needed to go there, and Drew was there, telling you about the wines and that kind of stuff. And he dedicated, and maybe he might don't remember because he talks to a lot of people. Dedicated like a whole hour talking to us about, the wines and the process and that kind of stuff. I mean, Drew is somebody that is very passionate about his work. So the only thing that he talks about is wine. So he's an encyclopedia of winemaking, right? So I was just very impressed when then finally we decided to go through making wine and who will help us. That when we interviewed Drew, I think we thought that was the best fit for us, yeah.
Tell me about working with him, and obviously he's a winemaker. He has his ideas of what he's going to do. You have your ideas of what you want. Tell me about finding what you want to have in a bottle of your wine, and how you kind of communicated that with him, and how much work it was for you. I mean, was it a pretty natural fit, or did you kind of have to figure out, just do a lot of trials to figure out what you wanted?
Drew's a 25-year veteran of the industry here, and just a kind of a consummate professional. So for him, the idea of making wine in the style that we wanted to see was that was just kind of part of what he does, right? So that part wasn't a struggle whatsoever. His natural inclination may be a little bit in this direction, ours may be in a little different direction. We kind of pulls us into a happy medium, I think, in terms of what we get in the end. So it's been a very good.
Yeah, and he likes that we're very involved, that we really wanted to learn, because that was one of the first things that.
Some days.
Yeah, some days. Well, he's very busy. He's getting so busy. So now, no, but I remember in the beginning. I was like, because I didn't know too much about winemaking, I used to go a lot to the winery and then like, show me this, show me that, and how do you do that? And maybe it was a lot for him, but even that he took the time to tell us, right, things about the process and trying to educating us about, the profiles in the first stage after the whole fermentation, and after you put the wine in the barrel, and how that evolves with time, because it tastes really different, right? In the beginning, just taste the grape juice, and then start the winemaking process. And we used to go and taste the barrels, and that kind of stuff. And I was like, I don't know what is, how this is going to turn in, in 10 months. And he used to tell you, I think this is going to go this direction. And then he was very good listener about, what are the ones that you like the most? Just bring me the bottles and let's just talk about the personality, talk about the profile. So he really listened to us about the ones that we wanted to make according to our soils, according to our place, because our ones we want to express, our place. So we didn't want him to decide the personality of our wines, because he has also his own brand. So we wanted to, kind of bring something that it will be the personality of our place. Yeah. So, but it's pretty easy working with him, and Jessica West, she's amazing. So they really listen. I mean, they're busy, but they try to listen. Right. Yeah.
Tell me about naming your brand, naming your place, and what's behind the name Cramoisi.
Yeah. So the name was very difficult to find. It's not like, I thought naming your kids, it was very difficult, but there could be, a million Mateos in the world, right? It doesn't matter if you name a Mateo and there's another one in Spain or Mexico or here, right? But when you try to pick the name for your brand, you have to be very careful, right? That the brand doesn't exist in other places, the name doesn't exist in other regions, or if it has maybe a name in in type of a food that you don't want it to, you know, people to get recognized about like, oh yeah, remember that? So we came up with a list. We bought I remember we bought some books about native names, and we bought some books about, you know, we were reading a lot and tried to pick like the best names that they were good. Like, I mean, one of the names I remember was the Oak Savannah, because this used to be an Oak Savannah, but it was taken, for example. There were lots of names that came in our mind, that we have a list of maybe 150 kind of ideas, you know, that we wanted, and we just put it on a paper, and then was like searching, and I was like, okay, this is taken, this is taken, this is taken, this is like, oh no, this is like a yogurt, or this is like this, or something like that, right? So we were going through different things, and we wanted to pick a name that it was in Spanish, because I'm from Mexico. We wanted to pick a name that is in English or French, right? So we decided to pick a French name to honor the heritage of the grape that comes from France, and we used the crimson clover as a cover crop, but also to give nitrogen to the soils, and you know, it's part of our biodynamic and our philosophy as a farmers. And it's beautiful crimson clover, bright, elegant, the same as the personality of our wines. So crimson is Cramoisi is French for crimson, right? So when we talked to the trademark, right, lawyers, they were like very impressed that, oh, that's a really nice name, and no one has it. I mean, it took like what, 6 months for them to give us the answer about we could use it, something like that, and we just fell in love with, you know, the whole story. And then I find out that the crimson clover, the Romans and the Aztecs, they used the crimson clover, and also a little bug that has the red ink to dye clothes for royalty. So it was even like more interesting, right? It has history. And our experience in the tasting room is more like intimate experience. So it's kind of like treating you like that, you know, like a royalty, like give you really the time for this. So I don't know if you want to add something about the name. I remember you say just pick the name. Something that you like, but I don't know if you remember any names that you brought. Oh yeah, the Cima Coulee, remember?
Yeah, we went through lots of different names, but yeah, no, you did a good job covering it.
Yeah, Ryan had a good one. It was like the Cima or the crown, something, because kind of like in where the tasting room is, it was kind of like a crown, right? So we were thinking something about.
Well, yeah, so the idea being that, you know, we're at the top, and we're really at the top of the beginning of a creek, right? So this is basically a creek valley. It runs out this way. And so it goes down into the Willamette River. So kind of being at the top of the canyon, or if you will. The top of the canyon, yeah. But probably, like, you know, that part was somewhat obvious from the geography, but it was probably not the most defining characteristic as kind of learning. So one of the things that we started to notice was that our site produced this very kind of deep colored wine, and more so than maybe some of the neighboring places, and we could never really quite figure out why, right? You know, it's like, oh, maybe the soil's a little rockier. That didn't really explain it. And so you know, over the years we kind of came to realize that this spot is windy relative to, you know, where our house is, right over there, right? And then it kind of clicked. I don't know, one day I was standing up there in the vineyard, and I was, you know, you can see down into the Chehalem Valley, and you can see out in the Willamette Valley. There's kind of a hill over here and a hill over there, and, you know, it's like, oh, well, we're kind of the gap in the hills, if you will. So the wind really travels through here, particularly in the summer. We often have a very kind of strong north wind that comes through the vineyard in the afternoons and the evenings, and as Sophia mentioned earlier, I think that thickens the skin of the grape, and the more, you know, skins that you put in the fermenter, the, you know, in theory, the more color that you should get, right? So, and, you know, it's also where the, you know, the tannin and the flavor and, you know, all that kind of stuff is wrapped up in there too. So
is that color, right? The crimson, yeah.
I'm curious about, once you had wine to sell. Tell me about selling wine. What obviously you're not a background in selling wine necessarily, although a distant background in selling wine. Now that you have your own product to market, how did you market it? How did you sell it? What were the first steps towards getting your wine into people's hands?
Well, we made 1 barrel in 2014, and then we made a couple hundred cases in 2015. And so one of the just like kind of the economic realities for us was we couldn't plant the whole vineyard at once. And had we been able to, we probably would have. But we couldn't, and it turned out to be a great thing because we learned about clones and root stocks as we went along, and were able to kind of apply that. But it meant that we planted the vineyard kind of little by little, right, over the course of 6 or 7 years, and that actually meant that the wine production kind of ramped up over the course of that time. And so we had that 200 cases that first year, and so that was really kind of the first commercial vintage, which coincided with Sofia leaving the technology industry in 2017, and then she had 200 cases of wine to sell that year. A brand new brand here, and she didn't have a tasting room, and how'd you make that happen?
It was really hard. it was really hard in the beginning. First, because I transitioned to being a corporate business, and then being leading your own business requires a lot of discipline and a lot of energy and a lot of. I was scared. I was really afraid. Like, I didn't want to fail. I mean, I was just like, I'm taking this, and I remember I told Ryan, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I mean, first of all, it was completely in English. I needed to sell in the U.S. market, right? I mean, my previous job was Latin American market, so I could use my language, right? So second, I was just learning about the wines, how to describe the wines, and then I've been in sales my whole life. Because I was working for technology, selling software, but it was very intimidating at the first time, or in the beginning, because I was just afraid of, in the beginning, people will ask me lots of questions, right? How do you describe these? And I was like, I just like it. It's really good. It's from the Dundee Hills, and that kind of stuff that I needed to really put my mind in, really kind of go inside the wines and really understand everything that evolves to, when you present the wine, and be true about it. Not just read notes from somebody else just because you don't know, right? You really needed to understand what was happening, and that was good because 2017, what it helped me that I was 100% involved in the vineyard, so I understood the story of what happens first, how you grow the grapes, right? So I just started that way. Instead of talking too much about the description of the wines, I was just telling them the story of the wine, growing the grapes. And I think that was key for me to start telling the people how I was learning about wines, because I always very, honest about telling the people, I'm just new here. I'm not an expert, and maybe the customer was an expert, right? And oh yeah, how do you do that? How do you do this? So it was that was the beginning of me trying to, and I wasn't thinking about selling it. I wanted to tell them their story, right? And then it was hard for me too in the beginning because I'm a Latina, right? And when I used to go try to promote the wines or to sell the wines in restaurants, people were more interested about what a Latina, is doing in Oregon selling wines, because it's not very common, right? Are you the owner? They used to ask me, and yeah, I'm the owner. So it was very surprising for some people, right? So it was always shifting the story about how did you come to the United States? How do you got interested in wines? And I was just wanting them to taste the wines because I really needed to sell the wine, right? But then I embraced all those questions, and I embraced the whole situation about people were interested in my background in the beginning, that I was embracing that, and I was telling them, I'm from Mexico, I grew up here, and then I fell in love with this, and now we're making this, and talking about the story of the vineyard, story of the Vineyard Stewards, the story of, how we make the wines, but the way that I learn, right? Because as I mentioned before, I know more now, but I wasn't a big connoisseur before. I really don't know, still have to describe deep, the wines. I just say what I feel, and how my wines are. But I mean, if you take me somewhere else and tell me how to describe the wines, I can tell you some notes, but I don't know the geology of the place from where those wines are, right? So I'm just trying to tell the story of our place, our people, ourselves, how we started, and that helped me. And that was very, people were very interested about that, and we take them to the vineyard. But it was like a process, it wasn't like right away. I wasn't feeling confident in the beginning, first because of the language, and second because I knew I didn't know too much about it, and I needed to study a lot, I needed to read a lot, I needed to understand the process of growing the grapes. So, but once the people start getting, getting the story and everything, I start getting a bit more confident. I start I start getting to know lots of people in the industry. Donna from Winderly, she helped me a lot to get me, in some committees, to get to know some people in Salud. With our neighbors, our neighbors being very helpful. So I just, that was, I think, key for me to volunteer a lot in some of the organizations. So I used to belong to the Dundee Hills Wine Growers Association in the board, Salud in the marketing committee, and the Willamette Valley Wine Growers Association. I volunteer a lot, right? I can tell you about that. But because I wanted to really understand the community as well. I'm very people oriented. And so I think that also helped me a lot to understand the valley and the good things about it and the people and all that stuff. I tell the people when they come and visit, and I think that's a really good tool that I have. And now I'm not creating something that is not real. I'm just telling the people that come here what the valley offers you and what we offer them in our wines. But it was really hard in the beginning, to be honest. And then we started, remember, like in the beginning, I was like, oh, I sold $500. It was like a big day, in the beginning, and little by little. Now, we started building this tasting room in 2019 because we really needed the space, because we started having lots of people interested in coming here. And you want us to talk about the process? You want to talk about that?
About building the tasting room?
How we started, yeah.
We started with the concept of kind of like this little kind of cottage thing. This was the logical place to put it, because, we were talking about being on the top of a creek valley, so there's kind of a bowl shape right here. So it's very steep, and so it's steep this direction, right next to it's steep like this, and you need to orient a tractor so that it can drive straight up and down a hill. So it's really basically impossible to put rows on this little particular area. So this was kind of the spot. Happens to have a remarkable view too. So then we hired a designer and sketched this thing out, and it came out a little different, and then we intentionally set out. There's a little bit of good luck and a lot of things that have happened here. So, that's kind of how we got here.
Well, you said very easy. It wasn't that easy. It was
well, of course not.
Lots of back and forth, lots of decisions on the way. That, as Ryan said, right?
Did I call it easy? I don't think I. But
no.
The process was, coming through COVID was challenging. They were kind of shut things down for a while, and we moved kind of slowly through the. And, we had to kind of put one foot in front of the other with just the faith that we were coming out of it, right? Because, we were building something for in an environment that you couldn't even use it, right? But we knew that this would come to pass, so we kept going.
Yeah, and the great thing that happened to us is Ryan, his dad, he is a builder. Yes, he's a building company. He's retired now, but we convinced him to help us to build it. He was the general contractor. Mm-hmm. So even with COVID, he was coming here to help us, to guide us. Ryan grew up with a builder, so he's pretty good also. So his dad used to say, you need to do this, you need to do that. And he was kind of like supervising the crews that were coming. that helped us a lot. I mean, really. And he actually came last week to put the handrail that you see over there, and you know, he keeps coming, and we're still, you know, kind of in the process of finish. But I mean, it's beautiful. We talk about the intentions that we have is to have a kind of like a farmhouse kind of feeling, kind of homey place. I mean, you can tell we don't have a bar, so we kind of like inviting you to our home, not so much to a commercial building kind of a thing. That wasn't something that we really didn't want to have. That was our intention in the beginning, trying to make people comfortable to come here, more intimate, more like you're in my home. But that was possible with all these, you know, kind of ideas that we start having on the way, and his dad helped us so much, and then also the dormers that you see there. Your mom told us, well, if it's that such a big roof, like what about, remember the place in France that you used to love, the hospice, right? That they have lots of dormers. Like, what about if you put dormers, and they will look so beautiful? And it's like, oh, we didn't think about the dormers, but then in the process we put the dormers, and it's just so beautiful. So and also we invited lots of people from the community, parents, you know, like we have our 2 kids, 14 and 15, they have their friends, and their friends' parents, they have businesses. So some of them are electricians, some of them are, you know, they have the, how to call the Jill and they do the side, the
Yeah, they do sightings and windows and
sightings and that kind of stuff. So we're trying to also help in COVID people that they needed that, you know. So it was I think it's just beautiful, you know, the story, that just to bring in people that you know also in times of crisis, you want to say, to build something beautiful.
Yeah, there was one item that was very controversial in here, which is the windows. So they were handcrafted out of Douglas fir in Portland, and they were very expensive. And Sofia was not sure that she liked them. So, and certainly didn't like what they cost. But
but they're beautiful.
Yeah. But I think in the end, we're all pretty happy with how they turned out.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, you know, back and forth, like, but I want the windows. Okay, I want this then. And I want, like, you know, the backsplash, you know, that I was thinking it was so expensive. And like, but you spend a lot in the windows. What about if we spend a lot in this, you know? So it was like my job was the interior design. His job was like the whole building kind of a thing, you know, his idea. I mean, look at that fireplace. It's just so beautiful fireplace that it was completely Ryan's design, and he made it happen. And you know, the trusses come from locally from Maysara, and yeah, I mean, everything really came along beautiful. Yeah, but it wasn't easy.
And you mentioned, obviously, you started building it, and then, of course, the pandemic hit. So I'm curious, we're talking about 2020. How did it affect this and the other parts of your business? And what were some of the adjustments you had to make last year to make it work?
Yeah, so at first, you know, when everything kind of shut down, we were like, well, what are we going to do? Because our wine is sold primarily direct to consumer. So, you know, if people can't come see you, then how can you sell the wine? And so, but you know, pleasantly surprised that everybody stuck at home. You know, they needed wine for their dinner, so they just started calling and emailing. And Sofia, of course, had, you know, some
campaigns,
ways to reach out and talk to people, and it all worked pretty well. And then, you know, we were able to open up outdoors last summer, which works well here in Oregon. You know, our summers are pretty dry and pleasant, and, you know, it's not, you know, 100 degrees and 90% humidity or anything like that. So people generally enjoy being outside.
Yeah, we were in the vineyard.
Yeah. So, and then, you know, then came another kind of shutdown last year. But, you know, it was shocking to see. I think people were so kind of just done with being stuck inside and having, you know, this pandemic kind of run their lives, that they would literally sit outside in rain and snow and taste wine so that they could go out on a weekend and enjoy their life, right? So it was fun to see, the resilience of human beings, right? On full display in that way. So I mean, all in all, it was, it wasn't ideal, but it was certainly workable. So.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of support from our wine club members, with customers, people in the community. Like, it was just like, I was just amazed because I remember I needed to process the wine club shipments in the fall, and I was just like, should I, I think I need to call people to see if they're okay with that, because maybe they have some issues and they just don't even remember about, they have their shipment coming or something. When I was calling them, they were like, oh yeah, I actually want to order more. It's good that you called me. That kind of stuff. So it was, even in times of crisis, we got together and united in some way, and then we brought something beautiful. It was a good year for us in sales too, even with COVID, and even not having a place to have them. I mean, we kind of go really creative in some ways, and I think that's great, because some of the things that maybe you didn't even think about it, you just start creating new ways to approach people, or just enable to sell the wines, right? And being in technology before, I think that helped us too, to kind of, find ways to advertise if you want, or to use those tools. And also, I mean, we've been working from home forever. I mean, my previous job, I used to work from home. I used to travel, but I used to work from home all the time. Same with Ryan. So that didn't affect us that much as a couple, but also as a business owners. It was just, for us, it wasn't shocking to work from home because we were doing that. So that kind of helped us a little bit, because it wasn't like a big, I mean, the only thing I would say, that having the kids 24/7, that was a little bit distracting, right?
Yeah. I'm used to working at home. I'm not used to working at home with my kids being at home all the time.
It was nice, but at the same time, it was like working all day, breakfast and lunch and dinners and work and trying to do some errands, and the house gets a little bit dirty because you have the kids all day, and then that kind of stuff. And I mean, they help, but you have to argue with them about helping you, and have those chores, and the chores increased last year. So it was just like, I mean, we made it. But in terms of the business, I think we find some ways to survive in that way, and we did really good. Yeah, we increased our wine club memberships too. That way, some people that were referring us, they were tasting wines and just call us, and I was just very surprised about it, very happy. Yeah.
Obviously, the other part of 2020 was the harvest and the fires and smoke clusters. So I'm curious about the effect that had on you and kind of the decisions you had to make and reaction you had to make to that.
Yeah, I mean, 2020 was a challenging year pretty much the whole way around. It started with a terrible fruit set. So right now the vineyard's in bloom. It's probably right around 50%. So this is kind of like the day you circle on the calendar, and you can basically start running the clock to know when you're going to harvest within a pretty good range. So we started with poor fruit set last year, lots of hens and chicks in the vineyard, and it was looking very stellar though from a quality perspective, not from a quantity perspective. And the only concern was as we were starting to approach harvest, it was pretty warm, and then what kind of drives the heat here in the Willamette Valley is an east wind, and so when the air from back in the desert on the other side of the Cascade Mountains comes over here, then we get warm in the summer, and so we had a big east wind come in September, and so Originally, I was just concerned that we were going to ripen at the very end too fast. Ended up picking all of our white wines, so rosé, Chardonnay, and our sparkling, all prior to the fire starting. But then once that started, then obviously you guys were all here. It was something that none of us have ever experienced before in our lives. How crazy that was. There was a great deal of uncertainty at that point. It was like, what do you do? If you have crop insurance, do you just not make wine and just take your crop insurance? Part of something in me says, your intellectual curiosity should at least lead you to make some wine and see what you can do with it, because nobody in the Willamette Valley has experience with dealing with this unless they came from California recently, or Australia by far and away has had the most experience with that. So yeah, there was just lots of people, lots of different ideas, and none of them were particularly tried and true, right? So we didn't really know what to do. So we decided to make wine and see what would happen. We've got mixed results. So we've got some that's turning out really well, and some that probably won't see the market. So it's been an interesting learning experience, and hopefully something we never have to do again. But there's probably reality is we'll probably see it again at some point, and hopefully not this year. But we'll probably see it again, and I think we'll all be much better equipped to deal with it. It's not the end of the world, but it's certainly not ideal. So.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was, yeah. I mean, it was scary when we saw that, especially we were building this, right? And the fires were so close, and we were worried not just about the grapes, we were worried about our whole place. And like, what are we gonna do? And then when we decided to harvest just because also lots of people depends on the harvest, right? I mean, all the the Vineyard Stewards that we have, they're dependent on that, and able to feed their families. And also we just wanted to learn and see what happened, as Ryan mentions, right? So, it's very good experience in some way. Like if you want to take it positive, now you know what's going on. The people that decided not to do it, they don't know, so they have to learn if that happens again. And then we will have some people that they know how to deal with this type of events, right? Yeah.
So we had talked about all your other nonprofit experience, all your working with organizations in the industry, but obviously AHIVOY. So tell me about the sort of origins of AHIVOY, getting it, where the idea came from, and getting it started.
Yeah. So I think the idea started with. It wasn't just me. It was also Miguel Lopez and Jesus. But I will talk a little bit of what was. To me was interested, and then I shared my thoughts with Miguel and Jesus because they're Latinos as well. So when I left my the IT industry, that field, I started getting more involved in growing the grapes with my crew. It was easy for me to ask questions or to see them and to understand, just because most of them are Latinos. So I speak not only the language but their culture, right? So I was getting a little bit closer to them, and I find out lots of things that some of them, they didn't even taste wines. They didn't know what happened after harvest. They don't know, speak the language.
They would ask questions like, why do you cut the grapes off and leave them on the ground? This doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Like when you're doing the crop thinning.
The
right?
crop thinning, to me it was very interesting, if you want to say, but to get to know, like they were just coming, some of them coming without knowing the purpose of the tasks that they were doing at that time. What was the word? What that job, it will influence the wine, right? So when I was listening to Jessica Cortel, we work with her. She's our vineyard management company, Jessica Cortel, and she explains to them things like every single vineyard is different, right? So for us, we wanted some of the things that we practice in our vineyard. We were telling the vineyard stewards, but I remember this case about what was the name? Jesus. He came and he called me and he said, Sofia, we're dropping lots of fruit. I think we're not doing the right thing. When Ryan and Jessica and I, we walk with them in the morning, it's like, okay, just pick the best cluster. Normally it's the first one. And then the rest, just drop the fruit. Just keep one cluster per shoot because we wanted the best cluster, right? We wanted to make the best wine. So he called me. I was like inside the house. I'm like, can you come outside? Because I think maybe we're doing the opposite. Because there was tons of fruit. And then I came outside, and then I even called Ryan, right? Because also, I was like, yeah, there's lots of fruit. So we explained to them, what we do this because we are aiming for quality instead of quantity. But what are you going to do with all that fruit? And then I understood that they were a little bit worried because their harvest, that affected their harvest, right? They make money for, all the clusters that are hanging, right? You pay them by the bucket. So the more grapes that are hanging, the more money they will make. And I didn't think about that at that time. I thought about that when I was, sharing my thoughts with Miguel and Jesus about, teaching them, telling them what is our purpose because of the wines that we wanted to introduce, we wanted to make. And I was just getting very involved. I was getting very, interested about not only the activities here, but also their lives and how we could help them in some way and help us too. Because when they know what they're doing, when they have the purpose, they're going to understand what kind of wines we want to make. So it's very important to have that synergy with them and to teach them and to empower them. So I'm not a big fan.
So you kind of saw the need, right?
I saw the need, yeah.
But, AHIVOY was kind of born from Sofia, Jesus Guillen, and Miguel Lopez getting together for coffee at Red Hills Market. Mm-hmm. And they would do it somewhat infrequently because it was hard to pin the three of them down. Right. But Sofia was very adamant about it. And I think, Jesus as well, but he was a very busy guy. But you guys used to get together and talk about, well, what would this thing look like and what would we try and do?
What can we do? Yeah.
And, it was born of that, and you obviously had your idea like what you wanted to see, and Jesus had an amazing story of coming from his dad worked in a vineyard in Oregon, and he worked in the vineyard in Oregon and worked his way on up to being the head winemaker at White Rose, right?
Mm-hmm. And one of the top winemakers, Latino winemakers, yeah.
How do you get more people that opportunity? I think was kind of
yes.
maybe one of his big ideas, right?
Things,
which is part of the goals of AHIVOY, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was like helping them, empower them, but at the same time making and grow the best grapes, right? That as they know, as they get that knowledge, they will grow the best. So I'm not a big fan of giving money for free because we could just, we want to help them. Let's just have this foundation, this to give them money for whatever need they have. But we wanted to empower them with education. We wanted to even teach them, Jesus and Miguel, they were saying, what about if we just get them together in a vineyard and then we give a lesson about crop thinning or about pruning or about that kind of stuff, and who are we going to bring? So everything started that way. We didn't think about going to Temecula or Linfield. At that time it was just like, we just wanted to do it right away, and we weren't even thinking about a non-profit. We were just thinking about, let's just give them lessons. Let's just give them English lessons. Let's just give them, trying to make them part of the whole story in the wine industry, right? They're part of the story, but they didn't feel part of the story, but they're the foundation of our wine industry. So we wanted to get them know that we appreciate and recognize that job. But yeah, so there was this lady that told me, you know what, you need to know Jessica Sandrock from Temecula. They're going to have this talk. Maybe the talk is not very interesting for you, but she's going to be there. So just go meet her. So I went there to this talk, and I sat next to Jessica. And then I told her about, Jessica, my name is Sofia. I was just like, I don't know how to even talk to her about the idea that we have, Jesus and Miguel. And I just started talking. I think I was just talking with my heart that she's like, oh my God, I love that program. I love what your idea. Let's keep talking. And then I think that Chemeketa was trying to do some new programs. And I think she thought at that time that it would be a good timing, to introduce a program dedicated for vineyard stewards to get to know what happens not just in the vineyard, but also winemaking and sales, to enable to empower them, but also to give them an opportunity and a career path in the industry. So we started there, and then, as you know, Jessica got really involved with us. Then you were involved because you met Jesus Guillen before me, and Jesus told you about this idea, and you were very interested too. Like, I think that's a really, really nice, humble, way to help your people, and I'm here to help you. I remember you mentioned that. And then Miguel also, he's a very passionate, and he's a Latino as well, and he worked in the vineyards too, and then he was a winemaker with Jared, from Domaine Roy, but his passion was the vineyard, right? So it was like, let's just try to do this. So I think it helped us a lot that Jessica was involved. Then we started forming the board, right? I was so busy because, all the stuff, and then Ryan was like, you're so busy, but now you're trying to do this. Okay, sounds good. But we had the board, right? And then you're part of the board at some time, and then we have these 10 people with different backgrounds, different experiences, and I think that's making AHIVOY very successful. Because we have people they're very smart people. I couldn't do it just by myself. Miguel couldn't do it by himself. Jesus couldn't do it by himself. So it's just like a collaboration. I mean, we have Diana. Diana, I like Diana a lot because she has so much passion and energy. And when we told her that we wanted her to be the president of AHIVOY, she was like, really? Why you saw in me that? I mean, why not you, right? And it's like, that's part of empowering people, right? I feel that I'm almost 50. I need to help younger generations to be successful. And Diana is a big example. We want Diana to be successful, and you know her. I mean, she's pretty good. And then Cristina Gonzalez, Elena Rodriguez, from Alumbra, Cristina from Gonzalez, and Sam Parra. I mean, he's dynamite. He has so much energy. And you and Jessica and Heidi Carlitel, she's like our financial number lady. Juliana, of course, she's Jesus Guillen, wife, and she's very passionate about this, and she wants to continue what Jesus started with us, as an AHIVOY. So it's getting really, really big, and I'm just so happy that the people in the industry are helping us a lot. It's still very new for lots of people. Not lots of people know about it, so we like to talk about that all the time, because I think when we bring everybody that as part of the story and together, right, the better community we will have, the better industry we will have, the better wines we will make. We have phenomenal winemakers. We are the winery owners, vineyard owners, but we want to bring everybody together to understand what this region has to offer in the world. Right? But if we're missing a part, then it's just not going to be the best. Having all together as a part of this and give them the knowledge, and I think now we're going to be a very well recognized region in the world, just that is doing those kind of things, right? I don't know. I get very passionate about this.
I've noticed that, yeah. So, in your opinion, from your memory, what were some of the biggest sort of milestones for AHIVOY from its inception to now? What are some of the biggest accomplishments the organization's made?
Yeah, I think what it was very successful in the beginning, well, of course it was a good idea. We were developing little by little. I think I was getting the money to start the program. And so that was the first thing. We have a great idea. How are we gonna fundraise the money? Because I really can run this business financially. No, that's not too bad. But yeah, I think the first milestone was our getting together with ERAD Foundation. He invited us to go to meet with the board, and he says, "Just Sofia, that's a great idea. That's something that really touches my heart. I really wanted to do this in some way, but I'm a white person. I cannot." I'm not very approachable with Latinos, I guess. They might be, no listen to me, or I don't know how to approach them, but you guys are Latinos. I think you guys, I think have a great idea. So he invited us to go, and you were there, Rich. You were there. Remember that I was working in some numbers in the car. I'm like, okay, how much that will be this? How much money we can ask them? And when we got there, I was very nervous. We present AHIVOY, and I think we really nail it, and they said, okay, you can step out of the room and we're just going to talk about it. And I was just like, are they going to tell us today? I was just like, are they going to say yes or no to give us the money that we needed to start the program? And I remember we have only 3 people interested in the program by then, when we needed 11 students, right? But when we presented to Irad and his board, I remember he says, are you sure you're going to get the 11 students? Are you sure? And then we say yes. And we have the money, yes. And then when we came back to the room and they said, okay, so this is the money. We're gonna help you to start AHIVOY, to give you the money that you need to start. I was just like, in my mind, I didn't say anything there, but in my mind I was like, okay, now we need to go to the fields and really get the students, because now we have the money. So I think that was the very first step. Success, for us. And then we just went, and it was a little bit hard just because we're busy people, right? To talk to vineyard management companies, to talk to people that I knew or that I know about what about helping your vineyard steward to get education and learn about this, and people that were like, what? I mean, that's why you want to do that? Tell me more about it. And that's a great idea, but how are you going to start this, and where are they going to go? And then we were talking at the same time with Temecula, having the students there, and then with Linfield. But I think the very first success was getting the money, getting the students. We started with 10 students, I believe, correct me. And then the second one, it was just like we had the media, we have lots of people interested to talk about AHIVOY. I got invited a lot to lots of conversations, so that gave me the opportunity to speak about our nonprofit organization. And then 2019 is when we formally signed off the papers to be a nonprofit. So that was another milestone, because people that were saying, okay, we want to donate money, do you have a way to give us a tax receipt? So we really needed to have like the nonprofit established, right? So then we went into that, and then, okay, let's start the program. Then the difficulty was to finish the program in 2020 because of the COVID, right? So that was another thing, but I would say in general, those were the first 3 steps, like the money, the students, and giving, and also reaching the goal about being a nonprofit. Yeah, and then the rest, it's been like, it has lots of challenges because we are volunteers. We just pick one person, the program coordinator and grant coordinator. But the rest were completely 100% volunteers, and everybody has their own business. Everybody has their children, and there's just such a small amount of time that you have, but the passion that we have for this is big enough that sometimes we just sacrifice some of the activities that we have in able to do this. I mean, Brian sometimes says you need to take a day off, and I was like, I just don't have the time to take a day off, right? So yeah, but I think, I don't know, what you think about the other milestones that we have as an AHIVOY. You were part of this for 3 years, so.
Those are the big ones to me. I mean, the first class graduating was
the first class,
especially after COVID.
Right.
That was a pretty milestone for me.
That was amazing. It was here. The graduation was here. Having the students, I don't know if you remember, how did they start? Like, they were not very confident. They were afraid because the program is English immersion, right? and they were a little bit afraid of having everything, all the information in English. And then at the end, when we have the graduation, right, how different the students look. How they were speaking in English completely all the time, when in the beginning they were a little bit intimidated to speak English, and then now they want to be part of AHIVOY, they want to help as well. And then we have the other cohort, graduating. And we have in the first group we didn't have any women. The second group we have 4 women graduating, right? So it's evolving, right? It's a program that is evolving. It's getting more attention. We have some applications already now with some students. Jason is going to send someone, and I mean we have several companies now that they're very interested. They want to sell them in Argyle, and of course Lee. So I think it's a program that is getting very well recognized and very well accepted, and I think it's the right way to do as a community to function in the wine industry properly, as we support these kind of organizations, right, to help each other in some way. So yeah, I mean, I just can't believe we have the second graduation. Yeah, right. Yeah, and the support. I mean, you saw Argyle; they gave us the place to have that graduation. So, yeah.
So as you kind of diverted back to the industry here for a second, but as both of you look ahead for Oregon wine, what's the industry going to look like in the coming years? How is it going to come out of the pandemic? And then what will the future of the industry look like?
See how my crystal ball is working today. So I mean, I think one of the things that's certainly that we've noticed in the 10 years that we've been here is just the growth, right? I mean, there's so many more people coming here. Just the number of wineries, the number of vineyards. It's grown at a pretty incredible rate. But I always kind of think back to the perspective of where the grapes came from that we grow here in Oregon, right? Well, at least in this particular area, we're growing mostly Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Riesling, things, Pinot Gris, things that grow well in cooler climates. If you go back to the old world in France, where Pinot Noir came from, right? They've been farming grapes there for nearly 1,000 years, right? And they've mapped out where all the best areas are, they've been farming them for hundreds of years, and the monks have documented this stuff going back centuries, and we're just getting started, right? The industry here is just a little over 50 years old. The 60s and the 70s, there was very, very few wineries, and it didn't really kind of take off until the 80s. And so, our best vineyards, might be under blackberries or in trees today, right? We've got a long ways to go, in terms of finding the best of what Oregon has to offer from a wine perspective. So I just see this kind of immense bright future out there in terms of wine quality and the impact of Oregon can have on the wine industry as a whole. So yeah,
I second that.
Yeah. Okay.
That's pretty. Yeah, we're gonna grow a lot. Yeah, we just I wish we could still keep this kind of the sense of the community, like we just really need to remind ourselves that helping each other is the best way to go. Yeah. Right? Not to feel that we are like, oh, so successful, like, I mean, the people from the Willamette Valley Wine Growers Association, they're always talk with things about our industry, they're hoping to put the name out there, and they're great people, work a lot, and I think we need to keep it humble. We need to keep it powerful in some way. We need to keep it true. We have to keep our personality. I'm not Oregonian, but I just feel the Oregonian love here and the communal kind of thing. I think we just have to remind ourselves every time when we're growing to come back to our roots and to, you know, how we started, and keep it that way, because that's the way that is sustainable too, and true and beautiful, and I just, it's like when you start being, you know, like you're like get out of high school, and then you go to college, and then you have your first job, and then you're now a director, now you're the CEO, or like somebody very successful. You always have to look back and make sure where you come from. Yeah, and just keep it that way, you know, like have those roots, have that love and that passion for where you came from. And I think if Oregon keeps that kind of spirit, it's just gonna be good, even if we grow, like, because we're gonna grow for sure. Yeah, I don't know. How about you? I get very emotional.
By the way, somebody that lives in Oregon is an Oregonian.
Well, I
so
know.
you should classify yourself as one.
I'm Oregonian, but I mean, I didn't grow up here.
Find a vineyard to live on, and then it's
Right. No,
yeah.
I know, but you know, this is part of, I really know where I come from, right?
Yeah.
So I have to keep that in my mind.
I'm just
Yes.
teasing. I
No,
was
I know,
teasing
I
you,
know.
so-
That doesn't count if you're from California.
Yeah.
Right.
That label sticks with you forever, right? So,
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, you understand what I mean, you know,
I do.
with that, yeah.
yeah. The Oregon wine industry was started by people from California, ironically. Right?
Yeah?
So,
I mean, really?
Yeah, so,
What about as you look ahead for yourselves and for both yourselves and for the brand? What's coming next for Cramoisi, and what's coming next for the two of you?
well, one thing maybe we can kind of parlay this into that. What just was that I was thinking about was, you know, just in kind of the nascentness of our industry, is that, you know, when they started here, you know, they brought Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and then they decided that they didn't like the Chardonnay, and that it was no good, and that you couldn't grow Chardonnay in Oregon. We've seen such a huge resurgence of Chardonnay, and we've personally encountered great success with it. Wish we had more. We need some more land, I guess. But but yeah, no, we just released our first Chardonnay this year, and it sold out in like a couple of months, and we're just thrilled with the quality of it, and what we can do with it here. So. But I mean, it just kind of comes back to the fact, you know, there's so much still left to do. So where are we kind of going from here? Well, we just finished planting the vineyard last fall, so we're looking forward to getting, for the most part, you know, a full crop of what our vineyard can produce this year. We endeavor to take our case production just up over 1,000 cases, so we're still going to be a very, very small winery. We kind of intend to keep it that way. We want to, you know, just make the best quality wine and keep it kind of small and something that, you know, we can stay really hands-on with. And, you know, we are really happy with the sparkling. We just got our first sparkling wine out this year.
Beautiful.
We're
Yeah.
going to
release it tomorrow.
Release event tomorrow.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we just.
But there's one big thing. So Ryan, as he mentioned, he has his day job still. So I would like him to join me and be part of this 100%, because that's something that he started to, you know, with me. So and I really need his help. So we want him to come and be part of this 100% too, maybe in the next 2-3 years. So that's our goal. And also, we want to have our own winery on site that we don't have right now. We want to go maybe in the next 6-7 years. Maybe we're gonna. I mean, we just built this, so budget. You know, it's not something that we have a lot. So yeah, but it's something in our mind that is telling us that we need to have it here, and learn more about winemaking too in that way, right? With Drew, and then what other thing? Getting the kids a little bit more involved as well. I mean, Jonathan sometimes help us. You know, Mateo's very
Yeah, we'll
very
see
interested
if
in the
they're
business.
if they're.
But we'll see. I mean, my dream in the beginning when we talk about having a vineyard, it was more about like having a family and a legacy for my kids, you know. So to me, that's kind of like the cherry in the pie, right? To me, like doing all this together. But that's not their dream, and I'm okay with that. They're gonna experience something else outside of here, you know. That's good. They can screw it up somewhere else, and then they can come here with experience.
Yeah. Well, one of our colleagues and here in the industry, Cliff Anderson from the Anderson family, we were talking to him about that idea of the legacy and what do you do with the winery is you want to get on and retire and stuff. And what he said really kind of stuck with me was he's like I don't want to just give it to my kids because it's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be a burden or it's going to be an entitlement. He said neither of which are good. So I thought that was really interesting and a great perspective and something I'll kind of hold on to as we kind of try and figure out what to do this so we don't leave them with a burden or we don't leave them with an entitlement, right? They'll have to figure out if that's something they really want to do on their own and if they do, then of course there's
because
be a spot for them,
it's not easy, right? Having the positions and where we are, it looks really nice. It looks very glamorous, but it's not. The whole, the whole thing. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours, that you have to spend sometimes, at night and sacrifice some vacations, sacrifice some time with family. We're missing lots of stuff. Sometimes that we're like, oh, we cannot go there because we have this. We cannot go this time and. So not everybody can do that. This is not something that it's for everybody, right? You really have to have that love and we don't want to, as Ryan says, we just don't want to do it just here, Mateo, Jonathan, do it now because they're our kids, right? So, but in my mind, I hope one day they will love it and they will do it, because they want to do it, And I think we didn't talk about the Clone 122, but that's something that we're also gonna have, right? In 3 years, we're gonna have this Clone 122. No one has it in Oregon, and we're gonna start making wine with that clone. So we planted 500 plants last year, November. So it's gonna take 3 to 4 years to harvest, and then a year and a half or 2 years to make it. So still time, to harvest that clone for the first time, but that's something that we're looking forward to add it in our wines. Yeah. Do you want to say something about that clone, our expectations?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing about the future because we don't know what it's going to do, if it's going to be good here in Oregon or what, but...
we know the source.
Yeah. I mean, the ideas behind it are solid, and it seems to be a late ripener, and it looks like we got a nice early warm growing season this year, so it should perform well this year, and we look forward to see what it does.
Yeah. That will be the new addition to our lineup.
All the questions that I have for the two of you today. Is there anything that I didn't ask that I should have? Anything else we didn't cover that I should have covered?
No, I think that was pretty good. Oh, I gotta go, actually.
That was trying to get you wrapped up. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rich. Thanks so much, Tia, behind the scenes there.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys' time and your stories, and we'll let you off the hook. Thank you.
Yeah.